and welcome to the Riyal Deal, coming to you from the Al Arabiya English headquarters. This is your weekly bulletin, bringing you all the latest business news, headlines and analysis from Saudi Arabia. Coming up, the IMF upgrades Saudi Arabia's 2025 GDP growth forecast by 0.5 percentage point, a further indication of the dividends being paid by the Vision 2030 diversification effort. As the Saudi economy continues to transform, we find out how bold growth ambitions are compatible with net zero goals. In particular, what kind of an opportunity do carbon credits represent for the kingdom? And as the number of top restaurants grows across Saudi Arabia, the prestigious Michelin Guide announces its debut in the country, shining a light on the country's top culinary venues. Hello and welcome to the programme. We begin with the news that the International Monetary Fund has just upgraded its 2025 GDP growth forecast for Saudi Arabia. Well, the new forecast revises growth upwards from 3% to 3.5%. Well, in the context of lower oil prices, this upwards revision is seen as a result of the dividends being paid by Vision 2030. Well, that economic transformation programme aims to wean the kingdom off oil dependence, and it's seen heavy investment in sports, tourism and entertainment, to name but a few sectors. And Saudi Arabia will be hosting several large international events during the coming years, which will require significant spending on construction and development. Well, joining me is Ali Raza, Chief Investment Officer at Haytham Company, who joins us now from Perth in Australia. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Ali. Great to have you with us. We're talking about an environment in which oil prices are lower, and yet the IMF is predicting stronger growth for Saudi Arabia. How's that being achieved?
Firstly, Tom, I think it's important to acknowledge here, this is Vision 2030 doing exactly what it was designed to do. To quote your words, wean the Saudi economy off the oil industry. All of the developments that have been underway across the various sectors, the industries, the significant amount of infrastructure spending, the cyclical effect of that is now starting to show through the economy, if not in immediate indicators, at least in the leading indicators. And the IMF upgrade, I think, is a reflection of that. As it stands, there's nearly $2 trillion worth of infrastructure projects in the pipeline. And, Saudi Arabia is one of the least indebted countries in the world, with a debt ratio of around 17% to the GDP. So there's a lot of opportunity to borrow further to fund these projects. Now, naturally, of course, as these projects see their way through the cycle, we will see a significant impact on the employment rate. We'll see a significant impact on the income contribution to the region in foreign direct investment. And we're just really looking at one aspect of the economy or society here. There was a target to attract 100 million tourists by 2024. And last year's by 2030, actually. And last year in 24, Saudi Arabia exceeded that target. And the number is hovering around 115 million tourists at the moment. So when you begin to stack up all of these industrial or sectorial changes and the changes to society, it's no surprise that we are expecting a significant growth in the GDP. And I think the IMF notice is a reflection of that.
Yeah, you just touched on tourism there. I'm wondering what other sectors of the economy are really standing out for you at the moment, and that perhaps stood out for the IMF when they made that forecast, that upwards forecast of 3.5% growth for the year.
Well, tourism is an obvious one, and with all of the incredible events coming up, from the Asia Cup to the Winter Games to Riyadh Expo 2030, FIFA World Cup, just between these handful of events, we can expect a significant contribution or boost to a number of related industries in addition to tourism. So that's one aspect of that change. Now, there's also an enormous appetite for development in the mining sector, and Ma'aden is doing an incredible job at driving this transformation. Non-oil growth sectors. Non-oil sectors saw growth of nearly 4.5% plus in the first quarter of 25. Mining was no exception to that. So we saw nearly 5% growth in the mining sector over 2024. There's an estimated $2.5 trillion worth of resources outside of the oil and gas in the mining and resources industry in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is estimated to be the fourth largest deposit, or holding the fourth largest deposit of uranium in the world. There's incredible effort around the ICT and tech sector. I mean, Tom, you and I have spoken on a number of occasions recently about all of the development that's taking place in aviation technology. The recent announcements with Humane. Last year, we saw the establishment of Alat to develop an advanced manufacturing hub. There was an investment in Lenovo, who has broken ground on their first factory in Saudi Arabia, amongst many others. And all of these sectorial developments coming together, I think that's what's reflecting the change in the future outlook.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for that, Ali. We'll be crossing back to you in just a moment. Let's get a brief check of some other stories we're following for you now. According to the latest official data, Saudi Arabia's trade surplus has narrowed sharply, with exports down 10.9% year on year, driven by a 21% drop in oil exports. By contrast, non-oil exports increased by nearly 25%, while China remains the leading destination for Saudi exports. The Turkish Energy Ministry says that the Saudi company Aqua Power is set to build 2 large-scale solar power plants in his country. If confirmed, this will be the first concrete step towards investing billions of dollars in the Turkish energy sector. Well, during the past year, Aqua, which is 44% owned by the PIF, has already expanded its solar generation capacity in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Uzbekistan. And the average age of CEOs in Saudi Arabia's top publicly listed companies has just fallen to just 47 years of age. That's according to a study conducted by the global consulting firm Korn Ferry. Well, that report says the new generation of chief executives isn't just younger. There are also more locally promoted leaders showing growing confidence in homegrown talent. With each passing week, Saudi Arabia's economy is transforming in line with Vision 2030. At the same time, sustainability is a key pillar of that vision. Well, the country is reducing its dependency on oil revenue and diversifying rapidly. Well, by the year 2060, the kingdom aims to reach net zero emissions. So how are these goals compatible with the Saudi Arabian bold economic growth ambitions? Well, our next guest heads up the first voluntary carbon market company in the region. This Saudi company, VCM, was launched in October 2022 and is 80% owned by the PIF, 20% owned by the Saudi Tadawul Group holding company. Riham ElGizy, CEO of VCM, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Could I just start by asking you to tell us very simply, what has VCM achieved since its launch 3 years ago?
Okay, let me start by going at the history of the company. The company was incorporated in 2022, but the real announcement for it was in September 2021 by His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And he enacted Saudi Tadawul and the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia to look into that project and launch it to be the first pioneering carbon market in our region. So that's the beginning of it. When we looked at the market over here, there was zero demand, zero supply, and zero knowledge about what is a carbon market, voluntary carbon markets. This was our starting point. Today, where we are having 30 corporations from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia subscribing into our market that covers 70% of the total emissions in the kingdom. We have launched back-to-back 3 massive auctions, the largest in the history of the market, and that tells you the size of it. And today we are announcing our agreement with Agnevall, which is a landmark agreement. So these are steady steps that we have been going from one auction to the other to establish demand and see the size of the supply and as well building the ecosystem. It's not about agreements. It's not about auctions. It's about an ecosystem in the kingdom. Since our incorporation, there has been a lot of companies that has been set up in the kingdom to support the ecosystem. So all of this, the vibrance behind the market here in the kingdom and the region, this is something that we need to account for as well.
Thanks for that, Riham. Actually, I wanted to ask you about that deal that you just mentioned there, the deal you've signed with Enowa, which, of course, is the energy and water subsidiary of NEOM. Why is that such a significant deal?
Let me explain what is significance of Anwa first. Anwa is, as you mentioned, the electric and water company or energy company of NEOM, which is the giga project of the kingdom. It has pledged to 100% renewable energy for the grid, for the whole of NEOM, and as well the largest hydrogen plant, green hydrogen plant in the world will be in Anwa as well. So it's a massive company and with massive activities, and Anwa is so much committed to climate change and managing their emissions. That's why this agreement is a landmark one. It's huge in size because it's 30 million tons between now and 2030, but it also shows the commitment of NEOM to climate change and being green. And it shows our commitment to facilitate and intermediate in such agreements and pushing the kingdom further when it comes to carbon markets.
Okay, so that's probably added some momentum and some interest, has it, to the whole sector?
We've been not pioneering in the kingdom. I dare to say we've been pioneering in our region altogether. So this is a landmark agreement, is setting the tone for our region, and is showing the path for other companies as well.
Okay, I just want to take a step back at this stage, and I wondered if you could give us another real-world example. I noticed that Flynas has signed an agreement with you. Tell us, really for the benefit of people who don't even know what carbon credits are, how do they use in this agreement your services, the services of your company, voluntary carbon credits, to reach carbon neutrality? How does that work?
Well, Flynas participated with us in the launch of the exchange by transacting with us. And that is a huge thing for, I'm not talking about national air carriers in our region, but I'm talking about budget airlines as well, participating in that, which shows you the importance of that and the commitment. The airline industry is hard to abate sector because they burn energy, fuel, and that is very important for them to lower their emissions. There is the CORSIA scheme, which is a global agreement between the airline industry to reduce their emissions, use different alternative fuels, but that takes time. And hence, using carbon credit offset to lower the emissions of the airlines is very important. We have Saudi Airlines participating with us as well. We had Alpha Star, we had Flynas. So we had all sorts of companies in the airline industry in the kingdom. I would like to mention Saudi Airlines, that they were one of our anchor partners. We had 5 anchor partners. Saudi Airlines was pioneering with us in setting up the market and the ecosystem. So it shows how important it is. I don't know, do you offset your emissions when you fly?
Yes, sometimes I do.
Carbon markets is not only B2B, it's an individual commitment to climate. We depend on companies to offset our emissions, but we have also a commitment as well. And Flynas would offer that to their customers to offset their own emissions, which is something very important. And I'm asking all of the passengers to think about their own carbon footprint as well.
Okay, so that's a little bit about how it works. And of course, we are all, well, most people I think are familiar with the concept of offsetting their journey. You've mentioned a couple of different types of client, different profiles. So there's clearly no one typical profile, is there, of a VCM client?
Well, what we started with, and is very important, Tom, when we looked at the ecosystem in the kingdom and the emission sectors in the kingdom, I started by saying we were at zero demand, zero supply here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We looked at the carbon intensive sectors. We have cement companies participating with us. Cement is a carbon intensive industry, as we all know. We have the oil and gas companies. We have Aramco as our biggest supporter as well. We have PIF purchasing as well. And one of the things that really made me proud is family offices, private businesses in the kingdom. You had Al Olayan group. And when we asked them why you don't have any commitment globally, they said we are committed to environment over here. We had Abdul Latif Jameel in mobility, and we had Al Zamal group. These are all privately owned companies, but they are committed to the environment, which is very progressive here in the kingdom. So we had family offices, we had private companies, we had companies owned by the PIF, we had Aramco, we have Saudi Airlines. You have a very vibrant economy over here in the kingdom. And accordingly, a lot of companies are committed to reduce their emissions, which is something we're very proud of here.
And you yourself are something of a bridge, aren't you, between the world of oil companies and this new focus of decarbonisation. This, I'm talking about your background in Aramco and, of course, BP, both of which have a heavy focus on oil. Just tell us, how does that help you? What does that help you bring to the table, do you think?
Well, my first exposure to carbon markets was with BP, with environmental products, because we worked a lot with the California market, which is a carbon market as well. This is the exposure. So the oil and gas is highly interactive with the carbon markets. To give you an example, last year, Shell has offsetted 15 million tons annually. Aramco, to give another example, Aramco was the incubator of the idea to set up a carbon market in the kingdom. So the oil and gas industry is one of the biggest utilizers of the carbon markets, and hence there's a link between the two markets. Let me step back and explain why carbon markets are very important, if I can. Carbon markets are very important, voluntary carbon markets in specific, because not only they cover a wide range of projects from tech removals, which is direct air capture, big massive fan, absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere, sequestering under the ground. This is a massive scale project and it costs billions of dollars, to the level of the farmers. So I would say conventional financing, climate financing, go to that big massive level of plants and whatnot, but carbon markets as well reaches communities. I've been going to Kenya and working with women in cook stoves. They burn wood, and it's very unhealthy for women. The amount of deaths that come from cook stoves, from cooking in open fire, was more in any given year is higher than the 3 years that we had COVID in. These projects are reached by the voluntary carbon markets. You reach small communities, you reach the farmers, you do the carbon offset at a big scale like carbon removals. This is why the carbon markets are very important, because the wide spectrum that they cover with that and this and the big scale. And it's very touching to see communities impacted by that. The money that goes and the premium that goes to the farmers themselves to change their farming activities. So this is the importance of carbon market. Mm-hmm. Let me say another thing. The size of the market we're talking about right now is $2 billion. The size by 2030, we're talking about $35 billion. Is that enough? Absolutely, absolutely not. We need more investments to go through that. We need more pioneering companies such as ours to go into that. And let me tell you why. According to the OECD, by 2030, if we were to reach the 2050, 1.5 degrees Celsius, by 2030, the world economy should spend $7.5 trillion on climate finance. Currently, in 2023, the spend was $1.5 trillion. Is that enough? No. We need to use every tool, be it carbon market, carbon tax, compliance market, every tool to accelerate. And carbon markets are very important because not only they cover large scales, but also communities. That's very difficult to penetrate into them. Okay. So this is the importance of carbon market for me.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about something that's going to happen in the year 2030. Lots of things happening in 2030, of course, but one of them is a goal you've actually set yourselves, which is to offset enough carbon to be able to reforest an area the size of Germany. I mean, that is huge. How are you going to do that? How are you doing with regards to meeting that target as well?
This target is very proportional with the emissions that come from our region. We're talking about the Middle East and North Africa, and this is a fair share of our contribution to emissions, relevance to the world. What we're calling for is to scale the carbon market to be able to offset a fair share of our emissions globally through carbon markets, which reaches, as I said, different scale of projects. And it's a very important for us is not to only to pioneer here in the kingdom, but to go beyond the kingdom and lead in the region, which is why, for instance, we went to the Arab Federation of Exchanges last month in Tunis, and we launched a small size auction to make sure that we interconnect with different exchanges within our region and to increase the liquidity pool for our market. This is why, and it was very well received, not only from the different exchanges, from Tunis to Morocco to United Arab Emirates, it was very well received, but also from the Nigerians, from the African exchanges who came to us afterwards, and we were talking about connectivity, interconnection, having one order book, which increases the size of the market and increases the liquidity, is very important to us.
Now, you've touched on this already, but I'd just like to clarify for the benefit of our viewers, really. Why would a company choose to buy voluntary carbon credits instead of just reducing emissions? What's the motivation to participate in the VCM?
Well, I mean, companies have different, in our region, what we have seen, there are companies who are very advanced in their journey with decarbonization. And there are companies who are at the beginning of the journey, and we help both. What we have in the company, we have advisory services that help companies measure their emissions and have their decarbonization curves, and then use carbon credit offset as a complementary tool. What we look for is, if we offset only 5% of any plant's emissions, that's a huge deal for us, and it's a huge deal for the other side, which is the projects that they are financing. Let us not forget that carbon credit offset is a tool, is a revenue for those projects that are uneconomic without carbon credit offset as a financing tool for them. So what we do is we talk to companies who are advanced, like the likes of Aramco. They know what they want. They know how to decarbonize their operations. They have their commitments to net zero by 2050. They have interim commitment by 2035. So they have different commitments to reduce their emissions, and they use carbon credit offset as a complementary tool to their decarbonization of their operations, be it electricity, be it energy efficiency, and on top of it, carbon credit offset. And there are those other companies that we are helping with our advisory services to see how they can reduce their emissions. Some people think that climate finance is extra burden. I see it as an opportunity. We have to have jobs that comes around climate finance, training and job openings that comes with carbon accounting. These are all job opportunities that is out there. So there's always economic opportunity. Energy efficiency, it's reducing your electricity bill, it's reducing your energy bill. So there's a lot of things that comes out of reducing your emissions that is very effective for companies. And this is something. And also, we need to understand that there are shareholders who push their companies to reduce their emissions. There is financing needs that credit ratings with the financing needs come from how much you are committed to climate and environment. So there's a lot of different forces that pushing the companies to go that direction as well.
Okay, and Riham, just briefly, carbon credits are Sharia compliant assets, aren't they? Just talk us through that, because that's really significant, isn't it, in this particular region?
If I were to say something, if we talk about climate finance and Islamic finance and the intersection between them, I would claim that this is the might of Saudi Arabia, because we are the one who innovated that. When we started working, as I said at the beginning, when we looked at the different sectors in the kingdom, and we looked at the banking sector, we said, what can we do with the banking sector over here? We can offset their electricity bills, but can we go a further step? If you look at the Islamic finance size here in the kingdom, we're talking about $500 billion a year. This is a huge size for carbon markets altogether. And what are the pillars of Islamic finance? They use commodities as a backing for the transactions. So they use gold, steel, and rice. We thought, why not using carbon credit offset as a commodity backing? And by that, we channel funds to the carbon market. So we started by the Islamic Development Bank, and we got fatwa. We supported them and we worked with them in getting a fatwa from the Sharia Council to make the carbon credit offset as a backing commodity for Islamic finance. We succeeded in that. And we're very proud of that because this is financial innovation. This is the first in the world, the first fatwa, and it was powered by us in terms of technical and whatnot. And it was approved for Murabaha. And afterwards, we took it to the SMB, we took it to SAP, and we are working on launching our services when it comes to that. I think next year, we're working on the blueprint and we would connect directly to the banks so that if someone go and have a mortgage from a bank, rather than having it backed by rice, having it backed by carbon credit offset, and this is an Islamic pillar, you benefit all people. You benefit the climate, you benefit the globe. And this is so much matching with the concept of Islamic finance.
Okay, and just lastly, I mean, are you seeing at a global level perhaps less interest in decarbonising? When you think, for example, about what's happening in the United States, and you think about slogans like drill, baby, drill, I mean, does that mean less enthusiasm towards decarbonisation compared to, say, a year or 2 years ago?
I really like the question, Tom, and thank you for asking it. No, on the contrary, I see more companies committing. To give you an example, I'll talk about the carbon market and I'll talk about the oil and gas industry as well. For the carbon market, this May was the highest, 70% high retirement versus last year. Retirement is when you offset against your activities. So 70% increase year on year. That's a strong signal from the market, from the carbon market. If we look at the oil and gas industry, none of them have changed any of their commitments towards the climate. We still have Aramco active with us. We've seen all of the oil and gas industry, including in the US, still committed to climate, haven't changed in any of their commitments, and still active in the carbon market. So I would say for any company, I mean, geopolitics change, but the climate commitment is still there, valid, and you cannot change your strategy and planning by the change of different geopolitical changes, because it could swing the other way around as well. What are you going to do? So I'm still confident around ESG. I'm still confident about the climate. This is not a problem for companies. It's a problem for us as individuals. It's a problem for the whole globe. It's ecosystems. It's farming. It's animals. It's everybody who's living on this planet. So nothing should change. We should go steadfast momentum on what we need to achieve, and we're way, way behind. So hopefully we'll continue the momentum.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. Riham ElGizy, the CEO of VCM, thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate it. And having this opportunity was really good. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Riham. Well, let's stay with this theme of sustainability. And we're going to talk now to Håkan Agnevall, who is the president and the CEO of the Finnish company Wärtsilä Corporation, which has had a presence in Saudi Arabia for nearly 4 decades. Well, in addition to supporting decarbonisation efforts, the company manufactures and services power sources, as well as other equipment in the marine and energy sectors. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Mr. Agnevall. Can I just start by asking you to give us a sense of what it actually means when you say providing power solutions for the energy and marine sectors? What does that actually mean?
So we are building power plants, and we use those power plants for big vessels and for generating electricity on land as well.
Okay, give us an example, if you don't mind, of a typical client, a typical scenario in which you provide those services.
So if you have a big LNG carrier or a big cruise vessel, they normally use our engines to generate the energy that they need to propel themselves and to take care of the load and loading of the cargo, deloading of the cargo. So that's on the marine side. And on the energy side, we build power plants that generate electricity for utilities, electricity that we use for air conditioning, for industrial processes, and to make a cup of tea.
Okay, well, I've seen that you've got a global presence, all over the place, all over the world. You employ about 18,000 people internationally. What sort of a presence have you got in Saudi Arabia?
We have about 200 Wärtsilä colleagues in Saudi. We've been in the country for decades. I mean, Saudi is very important for us, both on the energy side and the marine side. We all know marine industry very important for Saudi's economy. Also, future aspirations to develop the marine industry in Saudi. And on the energy side, we provide energy to quite a few, you could say, industrial complexes in Saudi.
All right, so as you say, Saudi Arabia, an important market for you. Are you able to perhaps tell us what it represents in terms of percentage of revenue?
We are a publicly listed company. We don't disclose those details.
All right, well, Wärtsilä prides itself on fitting into Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. Can you explain how you see yourself fitting into that vision?
So we see Saudi taking a progressive stance on the future development, of course, of the country, but also the role that Saudi wants to play in the global economy. And there is so much transformation going on in Saudi. From our side, we note the marine aspirations, and we also note the aspirations to have 50% of electricity actually generated by renewables by 2030. Now, renewables are great, but you need balancing power, thermal balancing power, to make sure that the systems stay stable when you have such a big amount of renewables, because the renewables, they can vary a bit over time, depending on daylight, depending on weather. And then you really need the balancing power fueled by gas primarily, to make sure the system stays stable.
All right, so that takes us up to the year 2030. And then there's this next ambition, which is net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2060. How do you see yourself and your company being part of that journey?
I mean, to achieve such an ambition, you need to gradually introduce green fuels on the marine side. We are talking fuels like biofuels, methanol, ammonia. And this is where we are a technology leader, providing engines that can be used with these new fuels for the marine side. And then if you want to do the transition on the energy side, it is very much related to renewables, and also using green fuels like ammonia, like hydrogen, to provide the balancing power.
Okay, so when it comes to your operations in Saudi Arabia, which bodies, which organizations are you working with most closely to realize those ambitions?
So we are working with marine customers, I mean, marine operators, ship owners, ship operators, and on the energy side, we work together with big industries with big power demands that build our own power generation.
Okay, let me ask you this. What are your overall observations of the Saudi market? And tell us what you think makes it distinctive and attractive.
So with Saudi's aspirations for the future, and I think with the vision that has been set, and also the significant investments that are being made, all those investments will need more energy, whether it's on land or at sea. And as we deliver some of the major energy solutions, and that's why we think Saudi is so exciting.
Okay, and can you give us a couple of examples of maybe some projects you're working on or perhaps working with?
No, so we just recently, for instance, launched our carbon capture solution on the marine side. So basically, today, a lot of the existing fleets are fueled by fossil fuel. I mean, by either by heavy fuel oil or by gas, and you need to find a journey how to decarbonize step by step the fleet. And here, capturing the carbon that the fuels are leading to, capturing the carbon in the exhaust, storing it, and then either pumping it back where it came from or using it as a raw material in a chemical processes, maybe producing synthetic fuels. This is a very interesting avenue in the decarbonization of marine. And here we are now, we have a commercial offering, we just launched it. So it's a technology that is working as we speak. Now, our message is that going green is not black or white. There are no single simple solutions. There is not a silver bullet. We need to lever different technologies, different fuels, different technical solutions, different energy saving devices to embark and continue on this journey. And we also need to acknowledge that we are looking for a future that is, of course, environmentally sustainable, but the transition needs to also be financially viable. And the transition will take time. It will take decades. The positive thing is that it has started, and the positive thing is that most of the major technologies that we need to make the transition, they're already here. And now it's about deploying those technology. And Saudi, with its aspirational agenda, certainly can have a key role here to play. I mean, for instance, production of green fuels with abundant availability of sun. You know, I think Saudi is in a very good position to produce some of the green fuels because you use the energy from the sun to produce the fuels.
Could I ask you to perhaps reflect on how you've seen the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia changing over the course of the years? Of course, you've been in this industry for a number of years. Tell us about those changes.
I think establishing a vision for the country, you know, going down a progressive avenue, investing in new technology, broadening the economy. I think there is a lot of exciting things happening in Saudi right now.
Okay, and obviously everything you've just described isn't purely relevant to the Saudi context, is it? I mean, all of that is relevant to the broader global context. Are you seeing enthusiasm, for example, for carbon capture around the world sort of growing, or have you seen perhaps with the change of administration in Washington, less appetite for this kind of technology?
No, I always encourage us to take a step back when we kind of assess what trajectory is the world on the decarbonization, decarbonization path. And if you look at it and you zoom out, you see that there are more investments going into renewables. There are more investments going into alternative ways to produce energy than ever before. Of course, it could be argued that the transition needs to go faster, but I would say it's accelerating and there is more things happening than ever before. Now, for instance, if we take the US, yes, offshore wind will probably be halted or paused. But if you look on onshore wind and solar, it's really accelerating in the US based on the very simple, understanding of that we need affordable energy. And that's why I think that we will see some technologies stopping or halting, whereas other technologies will actually continue to accelerate. Also in the current, you could say, geopolitical context, but also context of different governance view on decarbonization going forward.
Yeah, and in the last couple of weeks or months, you've had a couple of exciting announcements to make. One in particular with regards to carbon capture, something of a world first, it was described as. Could you just tell us what that was and what was so significant about it?
So it's actually the world's first of introducing carbon capture on the marine side. Carbon capture has been used and has been around on land for quite some time. But now this is the first major technology that is energy efficient in the marine side. And this is a big step, important step on the marine side. Why? We have about 100,000 large vessels out there, and they are primarily running on heavy fuel oil or marine oil, which is highly carbon intensive. And of course, those we need to find a pathway for those vessels. And here, being able to capture the carbon and store it and recycle it, it's likely to be a major retrofit solution to help ship owners not be stuck with stranded assets, so to say, in the regulatory context that is evolving.
Okay, just lastly, I wanted to ask you very quickly whether tariffs have had any particular impact on Wärtsilä.
So tariffs in general, if we start looking at on the marine side, a lot of the shipbuilding, a lot of the ship ownership is not US-centric, so to say. So far, we have seen limited direct impact on the tariffs. There might be, of course, indirect impact if the world economy slows down as a consequence of the tariffs, but limited direct impact so far. If we look at the energy side, yes, we are exporting from Europe. So right now we are facing tariffs, but the demand for energy solutions in the US is very strong now. So we still see the business evolving. So to sum it up, the overall impact so far is rather limited.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Håkan Agnevall, the president and the CEO of the Finnish company Wärtsilä Corporation. Thank you very much indeed to you. Let's find out more now about decarbonisation and sustainability efforts both in Saudi Arabia and across the region. We can speak to the head of the Middle East and Africa region at Everllence, which has had a long-standing presence in the Middle East. Gaby, Hanna, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Everllence is a company committed to global decarbonisation and sustainable energy solutions. The company used to be called MAN Energy Solutions, or MAN, and we'll talk more about your rebranding in just a moment. But let's start by talking about your activities. Shipping, energy, industry, those are some of the sectors you're involved in. And for people who don't know, tell us, what are your main activities in Saudi Arabia?
Okay, our main activities in Saudi Arabia center around turbo machinery for the oil and gas and petrochemical industries, as well as power plants using our gas engines. We also have a workshop in Jeddah. We have an office in Al Khubar, and we've been in the kingdom for since 1957, doing work there. But our main business is oil and gas, service, power plants, and some propulsion on the marine, on the ships service that is done by our workshop in Jeddah.
Okay, Gaby. I mean, I love your company's motto, which is moving big things to zero. That's the motto. And there are, of course, lots of big things in Saudi Arabia. There's the port, the King Abdullah port. There's the Red Sea project. Lots of other Vision 2030 initiatives. What's your assessment of the kingdom's progress when it comes to that journey towards net zero?
In one word, it's brilliant. The kingdom is leading the region in their initiative on reducing carbon footprint. They have introduced a law a couple of years ago whereby every new plant has to have some carbon capture within its systems. We are currently, or we just finished a big project on carbon capture in the kingdom called Osmaniya Hawiya. And there are many other projects that we are working on in the kingdom, on that. But a lot of the things that people don't know about is that they always think of oil and gas production or manufacturing of petrochemicals as the main reason for, emissions and carbon. In reality, there is one big culprit that causes 12% of carbon emissions into the atmosphere, and that is the cement industry, believe it or not. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on regulating cement industry and making sure that carbon capture facilities are put, onto those plants as such. Having said that, Saudi Arabia is leading the region. We are currently working on 3 more projects. We've just executed one, and there's more to come. And this is a very important so-called leadership move within the Middle East and within the Gulf. Because Saudi is what we consider is the big brother, and everybody follows normally what Saudi does. And they have taken the initiative of reducing CO2, and this is, as you said, part of our motto, reducing big things to zero. We are talking here about carbon capture. Carbon capture is so important to us that we at Everllence have spun off a department from our turbo machinery or industries, and we made it a pillar of our business. And it is a purely department for carbon capture projects dedicated only for such things. And we feel the region, with all its oil and gas and petrochemical industries and cement industries, is just the perfect region for expansion or for growth among other regions in the world.
Okay, Gaby, I mean, you've just said there in your answer that Saudi Arabia is leading in the region. When you say that, how far ahead are we talking? How far ahead is Saudi Arabia?
Well, you know, what is most important in such a thing is that when you do a project and you want to introduce carbon capture, there's an increase in capex. And a lot of companies, you know, sometimes, you know, they put those projects on the back burner because they have to meet such regulations. So what is most important in any country and every country or every new industry that is introduced to the world is to have laws and regulations and incentives. And the Saudi government has gone a long way in introducing these laws and these incentives to companies that want to do new projects. And they make them, we didn't say force them, but they give them an incentive to do a carbon capture facility within the new project. And that is what Saudi has done more than any other country around.
Okay, and Gaby, just continuing our conversation about sort of the broader region. I mean, you know this region very well. You've been telling us that Everllence has been present in Saudi Arabia since the 1950s. What changes in attitude have you noticed with regards to decarbonisation, sustainability, that sort of thing in the region, and in particular in Saudi Arabia?
Well, you know, such things, you know, feeling good about the environment or, you know, caring for Mother Earth is a way of life. So it's not something that goes from top to bottom. It's something that goes from bottom to top. And people have to understand that we have to protect Mother Earth. And in doing so, when you have a government regulating laws, when you have a government introducing incentives, then it becomes, as I said, part of life, and people are more aware of the environment, more aware of how to think on how to cause less damage to the environment, etc. And that's you know, it's a slow, progressive, you know, issue. I must admit that in our part of the world, we are still lagging behind, you know, places like Australia or even Europe. But we are, you know, getting there because we have to meet, you know, some stringent regulations that are being introduced everywhere. And again, Saudi is leading, you know, the initiative. And for instance, you know, in the NEOM project, we introduced, I think, 110 megawatt power plant that is engines being run on biofuel. It cannot get more environmentally friendly than that. So that's zero emissions, zero carbon emissions. And there, NEOM had paid the extra money, the extra cent, to put an environmentally friendly power plant compared to you know, other nations, for instance. So that's a very good example on how the mindset is being changed.
Okay, great to hear that attitudes are changing. And just lastly, things are changing for you, aren't they, at Everllence? Because you were called MAN Energy Solutions, MAN, now Everllence, which is, of course, part of the Volkswagen Group. What's the story behind your rebrand, Gaby?
The name is coming from two words, ever, which is the first ever. MAN is very well known for the first ever machines, the first ever diesel engine, the first ever subsea compressor, the largest CO2 carbon capture 10-stage compressor, the first fuel heat pump, the first gas engine run ship, and so on and so forth. These were the first ever, and we are proud of our, you know, heritage. So ever was the first name. And then the lens comes from the word excellence, which is, of course, our machines are considered to be one of the best machines in the world. So, and now we are making them more environmentally friendly. We have very stringent targets to achieve, you know, zero carbon emissions in our factories by 2030 or 2035. I can't remember when. But we are all in the mindset of moving big things to zero. And I think this is a fantastic sentence that we always use. So that is the reason mainly for the name change. And I think it grows on you, you know, coming from a metal cutting company, heavy mechanical engineering, you know, manufacturing, etc. And with the name, the old-fashioned name, MAN, Machine and Fabric, Augsburg and Nuremberg. And then we come to Everllence, which is a more friendly, more flowing sound. I think it's change is the only constant, and we are changing always, for the better, of course.
All right, well, that's great to hear. Thank you very much indeed. Gaby Hanna, the head of the Middle East and Africa region, Everllence. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Cheers.
Well, we're still here with Ali Raza, who's standing by, who's been listening in with us. Ali, I just want to turn back to you and ask you, I mean, you've got these two sort of almost contradictory goals here, net zero by 2060, and of course these bold growth ambitions. How are these two goals compatible, do you think?
Well, Tom, I think it's in this sort of discussion, it's important to track back a couple of years, perhaps. I mean, the discussion around green energy investments or climate or net zero ambitions is not a new one. This discussion has been going on for some time. It's been very interesting to see the change in dynamic or the meta around this type of conversation, particularly so. I mean, if we go back a few years, if you spend time in private capital, climate funds were all the rage, and we're still seeing a number of climate funds being raised. But as of late, we're hearing a different sentiment. Now you raise a climate fund, but investors also want to know, what is the alpha here? What is the yield at the end of this? We want to pursue social ambitions. We want to do good for the world, but we also want to protect our returns. Now, this is in a private capital context. Of course, the discussion we're having is more about societal good and the public transformation that's taking place in Saudi Arabia. So look, net zero or sustainability, it needs to be less of a cost center. It cannot be a cost center forever. It is to much extent right now, but it cannot be a cost center forever. It is a game of arbitrage. And, I'll land on that point, particularly for a moment, given the interview earlier on with the CEO of VCM. I mean, carbon credits help organizations meet their responsibilities and their obligations towards their ESG targets. But we have to acknowledge, actually, they're financial instruments as well. So, earlier the CEO spoke very clearly about the positive impacts to society and industry, and also how it supports the ESG ambitions. But this is a vehicle for financing projects, right? I mean, in Saudi Arabia, there's enormous effort towards hydrogen production and use. Now, hydrogen, for anyone in the energy industry knows, is not very viable right now, exactly as it stands, but that does not mean it is not offering viable cases. Should we not invest in it? Should we take a bit more time? I mean, there is a balancing question here, but carbon credits are one of the instruments that enable the financing of projects and efforts, whether they be ambitious like hydrogen or just sheer reappropriation of interest within current organizations. So the answer, Tom, is really, there's a careful balance required here. I think, as always, I'm very fascinated and hopeful about the strategy that's being employed by Saudi Arabia in this effect. There's a very clear intention towards the value chain around energy and industry, and particularly the carbon neutral ambitions. And it'll be interesting to see how this pans out in the coming years. Okay, so let's talk about how significant an opportunity carbon credits are from a business perspective. And why do you think particularly so in Saudi Arabia? Well, the carbon credits market is estimated, there's varying estimates, but the carbon credits market is estimated to go up to $250 billion in the next 2 decades or so. And, a significant portion of that we'll probably realize a significant portion by 2030 and beyond. With a change in attitude towards net zero ambitions and carbon neutral activities across the globe, there's a natural push towards such a model. Now, at the moment, a lot of the carbon credits that are being purchased are under a voluntary scheme, and Saudi Arabia is in the process of developing a stronger regulatory environment. In Europe, we're seeing the introduction of the next phase of the CBAM regulations, which will require, if we just take Europe as one region, anyone exporting into Europe will be subject to a lot of the regulations under CBAM to purchase credits. Now, one of the, what we could say one of the bottlenecks perhaps right now of the current carbon credits market in Saudi Arabia is that we don't have a reciprocal agreement with, say, the likes of Europe. But come tomorrow, if a sound regulatory environment was to be established and this relationship is created, there is a reciprocal system, you could see enormous impact to all of the trade that is flowing into these regions, which are subjecting carbon regulations. So, given that Saudi Arabia intends or hopes to be an export economy with such widespread industrial development, Saudi Arabia being planted right in between the middle of three continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, we extrapolate the current state of carbon ambitions and how corporations are addressing this and reacting to this, and the world's willingness to do business with those that are following these guidelines. Extrapolate this over the next 10 to 20 years, and I would argue that it's going to be a considerable value proposition if we can develop this industry now.
Okay, thanks for that, Ali. We'll be checking back in with you in just a moment. As we approach the end of this program, let's talk about a couple of lighter stories we picked out for you. And as the number of internationally renowned restaurants in Saudi Arabia continues to grow, I suppose it was just a matter of time, wasn't it, before the prestigious Michelin food guide set its sights on the kingdom. Well, the list of restaurants recommended by Michelin will be released in phases late this year, starting with a focus on Riyadh and Jeddah, but also including places like Khobar and Alula. Launched in the year 1900, I should say, Michelin guides have 5 criteria and a secretive team of anonymous inspectors who assess the quality of a venue. Staying with food, starting on Tuesday, the 1st of July, new rules regarding restaurant meals will take effect across the kingdom. The Saudi Food and Drug Authority is implementing these rules with a view to making food healthier and safer. Well, with that in mind, outlets will be required to display the calorie count, fat, sugar and sodium content, as well as information about allergens. Well, all of that goes hand in hand with efforts to tackle diabetes, heart disease and obesity. And finally, the Saudi capital, which is home to more than 8 million residents, has seen some pretty dramatic changes in its skyline in recent years. For people who haven't been to Riyadh, well, towering over the city is the iconic pyramid-shaped tower, which is called the Flynas Tower. The 267-metre-high tower was one of the first skyscrapers to redefine the urban landscape. Then there's, of course, the Kingdom Centre, which towers about 300 metres above the city, one of the city's most recognisable structures as well. But despite all the rapid modernisation, the city is actually a blend of innovation and heritage. And there you can see some of the tall, iconic buildings that are visible and recognisable on the skyline of the capital, Riyadh. I just want to ask you, Ali, and bring you back into the conversation quickly. I mean, as Riyadh continues to change, I mean, I'm assuming it's changed enormously, hasn't it, since you first went there?
Of course, without question. I mean, for newcomers to Riyadh, one of the first things you notice is that the city is quite spread out. Depending on where we've spent our lives, we sort of look for the city centers or hubs. Riyadh is unique in that it's quite spread out. And the skyline, when we talk skyline, we often think towers. Earlier, you mentioned the iconic Kingdom Tower, which everyone knows as a centerpiece of the Riyadh skyline, but that's now joined by a number of buildings, particularly with the establishment of King Abdullah Financial District, which we have to acknowledge a few short years ago did not exist, right? Now it's home to PIF and a number of large institutions, and really turning into a thriving professional and cultural hub. But if I must pick any particular area that I would like to spend most of my time, Diriyah, I think, is by far one of the most beautiful places to visit. And similarly, like King Abdullah Financial District and like many other things, a few short years ago, we did not see the development that we do now. It's completely changed the landscape. Diriyah, King Abdullah Financial District, amongst many others. I mean, it's completely changed the overall urban landscape of Riyadh. Many of these areas have turned into thriving professional hospitality and entertainment, social hubs. So it's quite a wonder to see this kind of change in such a short period of time.
Yeah, we've talked about Diriyah as well on this programme quite a bit, and I think my personal favourite is the Kingdom Centre, which we saw there in those pictures. Thank you very much indeed, Ali Raza, Chief Investment Officer at Haytham Company. Thank you very much indeed to you for your time. And thank you to you for watching the Riyal Deal here on Al Arabiya English. Thanks for watching. See you again next week.